Okay, so we're gonna do Scorpio moon right now, and I want to intro the water moons because I remember early in the 2000s I found these books called the Matrix books, and the author was an esoteric astrologer, and he went into depth about water moons and their kind of power that they have in distinction to the other moon signs. And he was talking about specifically the water moons have something they can play with, and he used the term emotional fire. And I think what he was getting at is water being kind of the most powerful element in a sense has the capacity and the potential to really sink within itself and become something else. Water in itself is a passage, a portal to somewhere else. And we know with the water signs, transcendence is a huge theme. With Cancer, we have birth. With Pisces, we have death. With Scorpio, Scorpio begins just after the bridge between the self and the other, right? Libra and Virgo. And with Scorpio, what you have is a tripart transformation, and it's called the most powerful of all the water signs. It's fixed, so it's very strong and sturdy and very much into power and sexuality and thus life force energy. And the thing about Scorpio, when the placement of the moon is in Scorpio, is it actually liquefies the moon that much more. But in that sense, the moon still is still in fall. So the moon is in a place where things can go either way, either extreme. And this is the real shift about this sign is it has to overcome some things before it matures. Now with Scorpio moon, it has to overcome jealousy.
Is it? I believe it's debilitated.
Yeah, I said it was fall. It's in fall.
Debilitation is the same as fall? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, debilitation is the most challenged, so...
Yeah, it's opposite Taurus.
I thought it was in its fall or detriment in Capricorn, and it's debilitated in Scorpio.
In detriment in... Capricorn, yes. And in fall, so that's what I said.
Debilitated.
I don't know where the word debilitated is coming in. The terms are fall or detriment. Debilitation is just a term we can add. It's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not. It's
I
not.
like it. It's dramatic. It's debilitating.
It's fitting. It's fitting for this moon sign.
So it's ruled by Mars.
So I just wanna like make very clear that Scorpio moon endures because your soul is coming from a place, and this is the whole point of the moons. It's where we come from. It's our birth element. It's where we're most comfortable. It's where our instinctual impulses come out. And I want to make it clear that with Scorpio moon, often what you have is a very traumatic upbringing that kind of opens the moon up. And so because they're so strong, there's a tendency to experience like a lot of trauma, a lot of intensity, a lot of transformation before, adulthood. So there is a lot to work through by the time adulthood arrives. But the point is they can handle it. But the energy has to be handled correctly. It has to be shifted. Otherwise, they can waste and destroy themselves. There's a susceptibility to that. But the positive is very powerful beings, can really rise to the top. You have both extremes here, and can be very industrious, very powerful, very enterprising, very almost scientific as well. You have engineers, you have a scientific mind relative to the aspects in the chart.
I'd say there's like a fearless quality too to this moon sign. They can really probe into areas of investigation that other people might shy away from. Mm-hmm. It's very deep on an esoteric level. Stanley Kubrick had this, and as we know, his movies encoded so much. I mean, color-coded esotericism into his
levels
films.
upon levels, yeah,
levels upon levels, and,
of interpretation,
you know,
interpretive
he
possibility.
feels like he was a sorcerer in some ways
Mm-hmm.
in the images that he created, and you know, obviously a very powerful figure in the realm of media. So yeah, I think there's an allure, like there's an undeniable allure to this moon.
It's so powerful. It's almost a pulsing allure. It depends the person, I think, but there's just something that you can't describe. There's elements of mystique that can't easily be penetrated with the presence of such people.
Fixed water. I mean, being that the moon, you know, fixed water is what, ice? So it kind of makes sense that this is considered a challenge moon, because one could even argue this is an even harder moon to access emotionally than even, you know, as we talk about Capricorn. But this one kind of takes it to a new level of inaccessibility, because Scorpio, if they're not fearless, they're the opposite, which is fearful and intimacy. You know, I recognize, at least in the Venus Scorpio placement, there can be a real fear of intimacy, and I'm sure this could also show up depending on how the moon is aspected.
Well, there's the extremes in this point as well. We didn't mention it in the last bit, but you know, the person with a Scorpio moon will have a mother or a parent, you know, who is very influential in their life. In other words, detrimental. It could be in a negative way. They could almost have been destroyed by one of their parents. Or it could be the opposite, that they're completely unaffected by that parent. It's one extreme or the other, is what I often see. And so yeah, it's fascinating, as Molly said, that the idea that this is ice, you know, and it's perhaps melting ice in the sense of it's either destroying itself or it's dissolving into something else.
Transforming, yeah. It's not uncommon to see this placement in people who have a really, strong ability to help people in trauma because perhaps of the upbringing, but you know, you might see it in people who are like emergency, like EMT type workers.
Nurses.
Yeah, you know, they have to do like deep investigations, or they deal with crime, or they deal with even just literally work in the fields of death. And maybe they're death doulas. Maybe they're, you know, they bring people through those juncture points. But yeah, there's obviously a lot they had to go through themselves, and so then they have this kind of other perspective and insight into the mysteries, which really Scorpio represents, you know, the hidden, the unseen. 8th house things.
I'll mention one thing. A known person with Moon in Scorpio I hugely admire is Bjork, the singer.
Oh yeah, I love her.
Such a mystique about her. I got to see her live in New York.
She's so alluring. I saw her live in Chicago.
Oh, nice.
Oh, she's powerful. Like, her music is just like, she'll put you in like a trance, and her whole costuming and her aura is mesmerizing. It's kind of the word.
And the music is very emotionally adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
It's not safe music necessarily. She puts you in certain frequencies of emotion.
I saw her at in Chicago at some festival outside, and it was like, you know, pagan poetry was playing. It's like got that deep bass, and then thunder started, and it was like the whole festival had to evacuate because it was like a really bad thunderstorm came out. She was just like rocking it in this like intense. I was scared. I'm terrified of lightning, and it was like downpouring, and like finally she had to get off the stage because it was like, all right, everyone's like leaving. And I remember like having to like scatter under the subway, and it was like such an intense experience. Yeah, she's powerful. Her music's pretty transformative. And then there's a lot of like starlets who have this, I noticed when I did research, like very like women who are known to have that like sexy femme fatale thing to them. you know, Scarlett Johansson, we have Giselle, a lot of Kate Moss, a lot of supermodels have
Miley
this.
Cyrus, maybe?
Starlets, yeah, icons like Miley Cyrus. And then the actress, do you remember the actress Elizabeth Hurley? She's like a sexy icon.
Yeah.
And she's in that movie with Brendan Fraser from like 2000 where she literally plays the devil, and her role is he sells his soul to the devil basically to win the attraction of a woman, and she's the devil. And so she's really embodying her Scorpio moon. I mean, the dark side of it, let's say. And even men with this moon, what's that guy? James Dean. That, like, heart, you know, the male version of a femme fatale. I don't know what you would call it. Maybe like an Adonis or something. Or a Casanova. But James Dean has this placement.
Yeah, there's a mix of the feminine and the masculine in a certain way.
That's interesting to know.
That's what I noticed, because you think Marlon Brando, Aries moon, and then you have the contrast of Dean, and his energy was more like between worlds, right? He was still a child, but he was growing up. I mean, his
More
famous
like
film Rebel with a Cause, yeah, right. His famous film Rebel Without a Cause was like, he was known for that film, for expressing the conflict of adulthood, childhood, the transition.
What do you think of the water moons? And we can definitely dive deeper when we get into like Pisces, but do you feel like the water moons have any tendency to be like preyed upon? Like they're more vulnerable in a way? I'm curious what you think of that. Because they just take it all in. I mean, Scorpio might have the best boundaries of the three. I mean, or Cancer, it's arguable, but I would say with water moons, water is memory, right? And so when one's moon is that easily kind of
when we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about Pisces moon. You know, the need for boundaries, the need to protect from the outside is Pisces moon. They pick up any nuance, any cue of the environment. And then how do they get that out? How do they process it through? It's very difficult for them. They're very contagious to their environments in every sense of the word. You know, Pisces being without boundaries, it's so dangerous for them. It's so challenging for that moon. With Cancer, it's similar in the sense that there's an extreme reaction to their environments and what occurs around them. They're very strong, but it's still a lot for them to process. And similar with Scorpio moon, but Scorpio moon handles it. It does hide to process it. It can hide. It can, you know, whereas for Cancer and Pisces is a little more challenging. So that's why Cancer moon is usually surrounded around more control issues.
Or codependency that comes up with Cancer and both Pisces, where those moons are more susceptible in a way because the merging that happens by just having the emotions tied to water, and the fact that it feels and can be everything and be everyone, be everything for everyone in a way, and so they need to really have a container. But perhaps Scorpio being fixed water is the most contained in that sense.
Look at the aspects to the moon too. You want to look at where your moon is in your chart, whether it's connected to your sun or moon. If it's connected to Pluto, you have these kind of themes exacerbated to an extreme.
Or Neptune.
You know?
Neptune, the great dissolver, the great solvent like water.
Yeah, especially Neptune, right? That'll put a big leak in our moon.
You can look at asteroids too. Remember we've seen prey on people's moons. Yeah, a lot of fun. Asteroids on people's moons. It's big reveals, big detective work there when you look at the asteroids really close to placements of the sun or the moon. I mean, those are things you have to really work with. You know, those are like psychological processes that could benefit and open up a lot. Cool. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think we got everything across.
Thanks for tuning in. We will cover all the moons.